I was recently introduced to ChatGPT. If you're unfamiliar with what it is, it's a natural language processing tool driven by AI technology that allows you to have human-like conversations with a machine. It can also assist in answering questions, writing emails, creating content and writing code, all with surprising accuracy. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend you do. Advances in technology, AI and automation are changing our world and the way in which we interact with each other and with products and services. In Microsoft's recent annual report, Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, declared that digital transformation that was projected to happen over the next 10 years is happening today. Yet in light of such innovation, the financial advice sector continues to operate largely in the relative dark ages. According to recent research by the Lang Cat, firms would be 100% more efficient if their systems spoke to one another. At Time for Advice, we're on a mission to connect the industry for the good of firms, advisors and their clients. A firm that's on a similar mission is Seckle, the platform technology provider that is out to rebuild the infrastructure of investments and advice. To find out more, I'm delighted to have with me today Hugo Thorman, Non-Executive Director of Seckle and Chairman of P1. Hugo, welcome.
Thanks, Roland. Great to be here.
And it's lovely to see you. Thank you for coming over. So where have you come from today?
Well, at a village called Marshfield, just near Bath.
Okay.
So I've lived obviously near Bath because my former platform experience and Seckle,
of course,
both based in Bath, and P1 of course is in Exeter, so it's quite an easy trip to further to the southwest or of course up to London, so it's very
straight
convenient.
Down the M4.
Yeah.
Oh, you're a lucky fella. So Hugo, tell us about yourself and a bit about your background and of course your experience of the platform world. You are the grandfather of platforms.
Well, unfortunately that's probably true. So I spent the first 10 years after university in manufacturing of diggers and tractors, so agricultural and construction equipment, nothing to do with our world at all. And something prompted me to go to business school, and coming out I joined the industry, retail financial services, long-term savings if you want to call it that.
I remember it well.
And I have to say with regret now, I joined what was probably the sort of worst sector of the industry, of the direct sales force, life insurance sector, long-term savings of products which, you know, dominated by very, very clever actuaries who competed with each other in how to obscure the costs for the poor old client. And that was my introduction to financial services. To be honest, I pretty quickly picked up the desire to try and do something about it, which I did on the life side, but that's really, really difficult because I then began to realise that one of the problems was the life insurance systems themselves, because there's a limit to what you could actually do. And that part of that process, working for a bank in fact by then, took me to James Hay. And I was the chairman and chief executive of James Hay, and that was my first experience of the platform world. We launched the James Hay Wrap in 2003, one of the early ones. That quickly moved on. I won't go through the details of it all and how it happened, it's a bit boring. But more importantly, it emphasized the fact that what you're doing is reinventing yourself, because you need to reinvent the technology. And it was the creation of Eccentric, was my next platform experience, and worked there for almost exactly 10 years, built it up to about £10 billion. And I thought that was the end. I have to say, I did think that was the end of my experience in platforms. But my old CTO, David Harvey, who I met at literally my leaving do, or re-met, my leaving do from Eccentric, I asked him what he was doing, and he said he was building from scratch the code for a platform, dealing and settlement, the real back office, and it's, you know, nuts and bolts of a platform. And I have to say, I said to him at the time, well, good luck, good luck. and actually joined as chairman of Altus. And I sort of followed his progress and sort of got more and more of a bug, and had to resign, of course, from Altus because of natural conflict. By then I was already chairman of P1. P1 is an advice business. They wanted a platform, and bit by bit the two came together through various blips because P1 had been looking for a platform for some time.
And that's James Priday, isn't it?
That's James Priday. James, yeah. And so he knew exactly what he wanted, which is the future state, but couldn't find a platform that would fit that. And that's how I found Seckle.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, it's interesting because obviously we said in the introduction about financial advice sector and being rather outdated in terms of technology, certainly compared to other sectors. So what's your view on the challenges facing the industry and also advice firms?
The biggest problem, actually, you summed it up very much in the introduction, as Lancat said, and I pretty much agree, that we're about 100% too expensive. And we ought to be able to reduce the costs. The reason that the costs can't be reduced is because of the difficulty in integrating that data. And that's the world that we need to get to. The trouble is with legacy platforms and legacy systems altogether. It's not just the platforms, it's the cash flow modeling, your own interest, the CRM, the advisor back office systems, the risk-based systems, all of them need to integrate very, very easily for the advisor to use them in such an efficient way that he can reduce his costs and potentially his charges. And but I think it has to start with the platform. If you have a platform that works on legacy, it's never going to happen because you can't integrate with it. And so that's the big difference that Seckle had. What Dave, I have to say, when he told me, I did not understand what he was talking about. He said it's in the cloud. Well, I sort of understood that bit. He explained some of the languages he was using. Well, I sort of know that it didn't mean anything much to me. But the two bits that sort of began to make an impact was my introduction to this API, application program interface, which at the time, I have to say, I didn't know much about. So I did my research on it and tried to understand the implications. And of course now, what is that, more than 5 years later, it's much easier to understand, as every time we need to integrate, it is easy with someone else who has a full suite of APIs. Dave built this thing all API first, and which literally means every single thing it does has an API for the exchange of data, for either putting data in or taking data out. And that I think, will revolutionize the industry. But as we were mentioning earlier, the problem is that there's so much legacy out there. There are people who actually, again, I realise what APIs and APIs are. A lot of people, leaders in the industry, by the way, I've been sort of talking about APIs. One of the first things, well, we've had APIs for a long time. They've got two. I'm exaggerating slightly, but it's not a suite. You cannot integrate with them. They've got APIs, but totally inadequate for integration. And that's what needs to happen in our industry.
I think it is interesting that you say that, because there's a lot of sizzle talked in software selling. And I think the reality is, if financial advisors don't wake up to this fact and understand that technology that was built 25 years ago simply cannot support a fully integrated suite of services, they're forever going to be subject to or vulnerable to the sizzle. I mean, at the end of the day, and I think you said it beautifully, it's got to start with data, and you've then got to be able to exchange data meaningfully, the right amount of data with the right tools. And that brings us back to, I guess, the challenge facing our industry, because of course not only are the back office systems primarily legacy driven, but also the product providers. There are a lot of clients who need advice. It's difficult to advise a client unless you take into consideration all of their legacy, and it's that legacy which is creating the inefficiencies by which the advisors then have to run, because they can't consume that data particularly effectively. So, and that means review reports take 4 or 5 hours to compile because they're all manually built, blah, blah, blah. So you mentioned Seckle has basically started its development API first. And how's that project going? You started, I remember meeting you actually really at the beginning of Seckle, and it was tremendously exciting. Clearly Octopus has now stepped in, so they're the lead investor behind Seckle. How's that actually translating to bring the potential of what Seckle's mission was, I guess, to reality?
Well, it's constant. It's constant. You know, we're not there yet. We're so close to something that competes with everyone else. So the only thing we remain to do is we've literally just launched our pension. Yeah. We used to work with a firm called Gaudi, who were our pension provider. That's been brought in-house. We now have our own pension designed completely de novo, so literally less than a year old, months old. And we're now building drawdown in a way that will just rock the industry, because it's a very, very complex operation. It is the most complex operation we have, I think, in the whole financial services business. And it's how do you draw down effectively for a client without any paper? And that's difficult to find. In fact, I'd go as far as to say I don't think it exists. And it will be there in months, certainly before mid-year. And that will pretty much complete. There's a couple of other small things that our current 20 clients demand. So we pretty much knew what they were anyway, but they sort of direct us to what the priorities are, which is helpful. And that will then make us, I'd say, almost unique in having a complete product suite, everything that an advisor would want, but with this extra benefit of integration. And of course, one other thing I need to say, of course, is, as you pointed out, I'm a non-executive director. So who's driving this? Of course, David Ferguson, who has similar experience as myself, very long in the platform field, and he's on exactly the same page. You know, he got very, very excited when he first heard about it almost exactly a year ago. And he's the one now driving that forward with real clarity with the support of Octopus.
So obviously running an advisor platform is going to be challenging, isn't it? I mean, we're owned by Integrafin, obviously the owners of Transact, have been around for a very long time. But we're obviously completely supporting independent financial advice, which is why we're having this conversation. We're not looking to create a vertically integrated business, although we will build a deep integration with Transact in due course. But I mean, who would you say your target market is? Because, you know, I can't believe that something like Settle would be universally appealing to every financial advice business in the world. So what is your target market? You said that you've got 20 clients at the moment.
Yeah, well, it splits pretty evenly at the moment into two, but one's dramatically more important than the other. The easy one to talk about is the fintechs. The great thing about the fintechs is they don't particularly understand our industry, certainly don't understand the legacy, don't understand the dealing, settlement, the stock market, the fund managers, but what they really understand, funny enough, is the technology. And so it was pretty much easy to attract them because we already had a published, totally open set of APIs, which as soon as they saw, this sort of hallelujah moment, because what they found was point-to-point integrations were incredibly expensive and very, very painful. And so that's half the market, which to be honest looks after itself, I think, very much because of the APIs. So that is them trying to reinvent the industry to obviate the need for face-to-face advice quite as much, which has its own challenges. The trust thing that we can talk about later that Mrs. Miggins has with financial services without the help of someone, in other words, an advisor. The other then is advisor firms and also discretionary fund managers. So to run your own platform, because the Settle service is actually for technology, dealing and settlement and client money, to enable people to run their own platform. You need investment management permissions, which are akin to the operator permissions. So then you have the ability to run a platform outsourcing the technology and the dealing, settlement, client money to Settle. So the sorts of firms that they need to be reasonably sophisticated technically. And so a one-man band is unlikely, or even a three-man band is unlikely to be attracted to Settle because that's just too much of an infrastructure they'd have to build up in terms of compliance and governance that they could probably manage.
So they should, to be fair, Settle wouldn't be looking for firms like that either, would they?
No, that's exactly the point. And the great thing is they can be customers of our customers. So the people we are looking for are people just like P1, who are already a discretionary fund manager. It's easy for me to talk about them because I'm the chairman, and of course we work very, very closely together with Seckle, which is makes life so much easier in helping both businesses. But they have fully used those APIs, got their own in-house development team, and developed, for example, reporting. We were talking earlier about Power BI, the Microsoft suite, so they've settled on the Microsoft suite, and they've developed their own APIs and developing their own ability to build on those APIs in terms of a much more sophisticated model portfolio management service provided by an external provider. And again, integrated easily through the APIs. So obviously, one has to find partners who have that API capability. Obviously, Curo for the back office and for the management of their own clients, their own direct clients to the advisor side of the business, Pridis, and also for the discretionary fund manager for the clients of the platform. And also, they're going to use the APIs and the Power BI capability to actually develop their own UI as well. So that gives you an idea of how much can be done with a very, very small team. We're talking about a very small team here. So the sorts of people we're looking for are those discretionary fund managers and larger advisors that can build that capability, already have it. And it's sort of more like 500 million of assets up, because you're unlikely to have that infrastructure if you're smaller than that. There are exceptions, we have exceptions, but that's what we're looking at. And you start like that, and of course, ultimately, we'll be looking for the billions. And we're talking to, in fact, we have partners now already. Some of the clients we have already are consolidators who are already talking about 2 or 3 billion. Not talking, already own clients who have 2 or 3 billion. So we already are speaking for about 5 billion. That means that we'll be able to attract firms who themselves have 2 or 3 billion and up.
It's exciting times, isn't it? There's a lot of consolidation going on, and that seems to have accelerated quite massively over the course of the last 6 months. And in fact, we're currently working with 7 consolidators ourselves at Time for Advice because they like the Microsoft Dynamics story and the migration, I guess, to the Power Platform, which is underway as we speak. So there's a lot of really exciting change happening. And like you, we want to leverage the APIs to deliver the efficiency that our clients need in order to scale and provide a more efficient service. You know, as we've already touched on, financial services is a little bit in the dark ages with too many manual workarounds. And that's got to change, because if we're going to get to a stage where perhaps financial advice can reach the 50 million that don't have advice at all, that's something that needs to be addressed, I think, via technology. What's your view on that?
Very much the same, hardly surprising. I mean, the big challenge is how to obviate the need for much. You could definitely get rid of people filling in forms. Get rid of the paper. We've got to get rid of the paper. That's the first stage. And at the moment, we haven't done that. And you only have to go to a typical advisor office to see the degree to which we've still got that to do. But the difficult bit is, how do you get to a point where you either don't need an advisor, which obviously advisors won't want me to say, but they can own a business that provides the technology that will help the client, and then when the client does need advice, that's when they step in. So the simplified, or guidance, or whatever it's going to be called, and wherever we settle on that, can be resolved potentially totally in an automated way, and then the cost comes down to something that Mrs. Miggins can afford, instead of, it's sort of, isn't it? It's sort of somewhere between 2 and 2.5% a year, still, unfortunately, but with a minimum of hundreds of pounds. You know, I'd say most advisors say they need to make 1,000 at least. Well, then that means, as you said, a huge number of clients just can't afford it. I'd say, unfortunately, half of Britons will never save anything. 15% are being 15% are being looked after advisors. The 35 in the middle are not being looked after at all, and too many of them are not saving, and they need to, and it's how do we close that advice gap using the technology we've been talking about. And it can only happen when the whole value chain that the advisor, hopefully the advisor is using, uses that technology such that their costs come right down. They can charge a lot less, but still make a good living.
Yeah. So do you see that happening? Because I think you're right. There needs to be a way of servicing larger volumes of people more efficiently. Not necessarily actually straight digital. You can have almost a hybrid advice situation, because when one of the major insurance companies, car insurance companies, first started developing a digital journey for their clients, they found by monitoring the client journey, they found that a lot of clients just stopped. In fact, the majority of clients just stopped when they got to the buy button, because they weren't quite ready or quite confident enough to push that button. And they found that by interacting with the client at that point, they were able to increase conversions by over 50% just by saying, "Hi, do you need help?" It was that sort of comfort factor. And so are you seeing developments now with firms coming in, creating these sort of digital journeys to support a hybrid advice? I'm not talking about robo. I think robo, is an interesting one, and it sort of demands engaged people who will see a journey through, whereas I think the majority of people aren't that engaged in financial advice. I mean, let's be honest, money's boring, and financial planning is dull unless you have a real strong reason, like buying a house or an event occurs, like somebody dying, and that triggers or catalyzes change. Are you seeing firms developing this sort of hybrid approach, this digital journey yet, or is that still a way away in your opinion?
I'm afraid it is. I don't see it. People are talking about it all the time, but one, it's not clear enough how the regulator is going to treat it, and that whenever there's doubt and uncertainty, then people just avoid it, because what the heck do you do? What we don't want to get is a thumping down the road, which the regulator has got a habit of doing. Wait till you've made your mistakes and then say, "Oh, we caught you," and that's not helpful. And so that needs to be clarified, one. Two, I think there's too much to be done on the first bit. Just make the advice bit work first. Make the advice bit work first, make the direct stuff work. That does work, but you've got the trust problem. People get so far and go, "I'm not going to do anything." So they don't do anything until they've made enough money, they know that they can afford the advice. And that's not good enough. We need to fill the gap, and you're right, it can only be done by introducing some sort of hybrid, as I said, guidance, simplified, whatever it is, so that people can get to this easy decisions to save early on in their career with confidence, which they don't have at the moment. But I'll say something here, the regulator doesn't help much, but who really doesn't help, I'm afraid, are the Treasury, the government themselves, because they think the best way to excite people into saving is by coming up with another product. Every time they come up with another product or derivation of a product, and actually I'm thinking here of LISAs, which drive me bonkers, because how on earth do you solve, I used to think if you just said to people when they're young, do nothing else, just save into an ISA. Sorry, forgive me. An ISA, save into an ISA, because you can't go wrong. So later on you can put more into your pension. You've got your workplace anyway, you've got your workplace supported by an ISA, you can't go wrong. Don't save it anywhere else, and don't save it in cash, except for the rainy day money. Those sorts of things you ought to be able to manage quite well. And the trouble is, you come out of the ISA, someone one day is going to, well, why didn't you talk to them about a ISA? You've just created a massive problem. Now they need advice, because how on earth do you go through some sort of logic process of when you choose a LISA opposed to an ISA? Never mind a pension versus an ISA, And these things are all the reasons why it's so difficult to do what you were implying. It has to be either execution only, you decided yourself, or somebody actually helps you through it. And we just keep blowing our own foot off, which we have a habit of doing in this country. And I think we need to resolve that one as well, if not first.
So I think that's a really interesting point, actually, and we're going to wrap up now. But I think in summary then, clearly we're not going to solve the advice gap anytime soon, is what I heard. Because there are numerous challenges there. But the journey begins with modern technology, supporting financial advisors, working with other technology providers that have the same mission, which is to connect the industry in a way that delivers greater efficiency, enabling firms to then do the day job better and quicker, more reliably and more profitably. Does that make sense?
You put the words in my mouth. And I happen to agree with them. Yeah, absolutely. Displace the legacy providers. Absolutely.
There you have it. Well, Hugo, thank you so much. It's really been very interesting, and looking forward to seeing it on the website.
Yeah.
Take care. Thanks a lot, Hugo.
Thanks, Roland.
Cheers.